I never thought my life would implode in the middle of my own birthday party. But there I was, standing in our beautifully decorated living room, surrounded by friends and family, watching my husband Greg's face contort with a mixture of pain and fury as he spat out the words that would change everything. "Our daughter isn't mine." The room fell silent. I could hear the ice cubes clinking in people's drinks, the low hum of the air conditioner, and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. For a moment I thought I was having some kind of surreal nightmare. But the looks on everyone's faces, shock, disgust, pity, told me this was all too real. How did we get here? How did my carefully constructed life fall apart so spectacularly? I guess I should start at the beginning, or at least the beginning of the end. My name is Olivia, and up until my 30th birthday I thought I had it all figured out. I had a successful career as a marketing executive, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and what I believed to be a happy marriage to Greg, my college sweetheart. We had an adorable 5-year-old daughter, Lily, who was the light of our lives. From the outside we were the perfect family. But perfection, as they say, is often just an illusion. It all started to unravel about a month before my birthday. I was having lunch with my best friend Megan at our favorite cafe. We'd known each other since high school and shared everything. Well, almost everything. "So, how are things with Greg?" Megan asked, stirring her latte absently. I sighed, picking at my salad. Same old, same old. He's been working late a lot lately. I barely see him anymore. Megan raised an eyebrow. That sounds familiar. Remember Tom? I felt a jolt of electricity run through me at the mention of his name. Tom, my coworker. My friend. My lover. Megan, I hissed, glancing around nervously. We agreed never to talk about that again. She rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, Liv. It's been 5 years. Don't tell me you're still carrying a torch for him. I shook my head vehemently. Of course not. That was a mistake. A stupid, reckless mistake that almost cost me everything. Megan leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. But it didn't, did it? Greg never found out. And Lily, well, she's the spitting image of you anyway. I felt my stomach lurch. Megan, please. I can't think about that. Lily is Greg's daughter. End of story. My friend sat back, a strange look on her face. Is she though? I mean, have you ever actually done a paternity test? Of course not. I snapped, louder than I intended. A few heads turned in our direction and I lowered my voice. Why would I? Greg is her father in every way that matters. Megan shrugged. Your Greg is a fool. He didn't find out about your affair, and now he's supporting someone else's daughter. I'm just saying, Liv. Secrets have a way of coming out. And when they do, it's usually in the worst possible way. I had no idea how prophetic those words would turn out to be. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that at that very moment, Greg was sitting in his car just outside the cafe. His face ashen as he listened to our conversation through the bug he planted in my purse. I found out later that he'd been suspicious for weeks. Little things had started to add up. Hushed phone conversations, unexplained charges on our credit card, the way I sometimes flinched when he touched me. He'd convinced himself that I was having an affair, but he never could have imagined the truth was so much worse. As Megan and I continued our lunch, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing, Greg sat in his car, his world crumbling around him. He listened as I confessed to my passing discretion, as Megan laughed about what a fool Greg was for not seeing it, as we casually discussed the possibility that the little girl he'd raised and loved for 5 years might not be his. I'd often wonder what went through his mind in those moments. Did he cry? Did he scream? Did he consider confronting us right there in the cafe? Whatever his initial reaction, by the time I got home that afternoon, he had composed himself enough to greet me with a kiss and ask about my day as if nothing had happened. For the next few weeks, Greg was the perfect husband. He came home early from work, brought me flowers for no reason, and doted on Lily even more than usual. I was thrilled, thinking our marriage had somehow found a second wind. Little did I know he was meticulously planning his revenge. The day of my 30th birthday dawned bright and clear. I woke up to breakfast in bed, courtesy of Greg and Lily, as I sipped my coffee and opened the little gift box they presented me. A beautiful pair of diamond earrings. I felt a surge of guilt. How could I have ever betrayed this man? "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Greg said, kissing me on the forehead. "I hope you're ready for a day full of surprises." Oh, if only I'd known just how surprising it would be. The party was in full swing by early evening. Our house was filled with friends, family, and colleagues. The wine was flowing, the music was playing, and everyone seemed to be having a great time. I was in the middle of a conversation with my sister when Greg clinked his glass, calling for everyone's attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "to my beautiful wife Olivia, on her 30th birthday." A chorus of "Hear, hear" echoed through the crowd. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. This was perfect. Everything was perfect. And then, in an instant, it wasn't. Greg's face changed, his warm smile morphing into something cold and hard. "I'd also like to make an announcement," he continued, his eyes locked on mine. "Something I recently discovered about our perfect little family." My heart started to race. What was he doing? "You see," Greg said, his voice eerily calm, "I found out that our daughter, Lily, isn't actually mine." The room collectively gasped. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of sick joke. But Greg wasn't finished. "That's right, folks. My loving wife here had an affair 5 years ago with a coworker. Unluckily, I got to raise the result of their little fling." He turned to face me directly, his eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and anger I'd never seen before. "Did you really think I'd never find out, Olivia? Did you think you could just lie to me for the rest of our lives?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could I possibly say? How could I explain? How could I make this right? As I stood there, frozen in shock and shame, the room erupted into chaos. People were whispering, some were shouting, others were heading for the door. I caught snippets of conversations around me. "I can't believe she would do something like that. Poor Greg, raising another man's child. I always thought there was something off about their relationship." My sister grabbed my arm, her face a mixture of confusion and disappointment. "Liv, is this true? How could you?" I shook her off, desperately searching the room for a friendly face, someone who would stand by me. My eyes landed on Megan, but to my horror, she was already heading for the door, avoiding my gaze. "Megan," I called out, my voice cracking. "Megan, please." She paused for a moment, turning to look at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "I'm sorry, Liv. I can't. I just can't." And with that, she was gone. I turned back to Greg, tears streaming down my face. "Greg, please," I begged. "We can talk about this. We can work this out." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that sent chills down my spine. "Work it out? Are you serious right now, Olivia? You've been lying to me for 5 years. 5 years. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" I reached out to touch his arm, but he jerked away as if my touch burned him. "Don't," he spat. "Don't you dare touch me." And then, as if things couldn't get any worse, I heard a small voice from the doorway. "Mommy? Daddy? What's going on?" Lily stood there in her pajamas, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Greg's face softened for a moment as he looked at her, and I saw the conflict in his eyes. Despite everything, he loved her. She was his daughter in every way that mattered. "It's okay, sweetie," he said, his voice gentle. "Go back to bed. We'll explain everything in the morning." As Greg's mother ushered Lily back upstairs, I felt my world closing in around me. How did it come to this? How had one mistake, one moment of weakness, led to such devastation? The party dissolved quickly after that. People couldn't get out of our house fast enough, leaving behind half-empty glasses and plates of uneaten food. Soon it was just Greg and me, standing in the wreckage of what had once been our life. "I want you out of this house," Greg said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Tonight." "Greg, please," I pleaded. "Where am I supposed to go?" He shrugged, already turning away from me. "That's not my problem anymore, Olivia. You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it." As I packed a bag with shaking hands, I tried to process what had just happened. In the span of an hour, I'd lost my husband, my home, and quite possibly my daughter. All because of a secret I thought I'd buried long ago. I spent that night in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, crying until I had no tears left. I tried calling Megan repeatedly, but she didn't answer. I even tried calling Tom, my old lover, but his number had been disconnected. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in my adult life. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a sense of determination. I had to fix this. I had to make things right. If not for me, then for Lily. She didn't deserve to suffer because of my mistakes. I showered, put on fresh clothes, and headed back to our Greg's house. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw him loading suitcases into his car. "What are you doing?" I asked, my heart racing. Greg didn't even look at me as he answered. "I'm taking Lily to stay with my parents for a while. We both need some time away from all of this." "You can't just take her," I protested. "She's my daughter too." He slammed the trunk shut and finally turned to face me. "Is she Olivia? Is she really? Because from where I'm standing, you gave up the right to call her your daughter the moment you decided to lie about who her father was." His words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, tears welling up in my eyes. "Greg, please, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But please don't punish Lily for my mistakes. She needs her mother." For a moment, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Greg's eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. "What Lily needs is stability and honesty. Two things you seem incapable of providing." Before I could respond, the front door opened and Lily came bounding out, her backpack bouncing behind her. "Mommy," she cried, running towards me. I knelt down and wrapped her in my arms, breathing in her familiar scent. "Hi, baby," I whispered. My voice chirped with emotion. "Are you coming with us to Grandma and Grandpa's?" she asked, her eyes bright with excitement. I looked up at Greg, silently pleading. He shook his head almost imperceptibly. "Not this time, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll see you real soon, okay?" Lily's face fell. "But why? Don't you want to come?" "Of course I do, baby. More than anything. But sometimes grown-ups need some time apart to figure things out." Greg stepped forward, gently taking Lily's hand. "Come on, princess. We need to get going if we want to beat the traffic." As I got into the car, I stood there helplessly, watching my family drive away. I didn't know it then, but it would be the last time I saw Lily for a long time. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, mediation sessions, and sleepless nights. Greg filed for divorce almost immediately, citing irreconcilable differences. He also petitioned for full custody of Lily, arguing that my deceit made me an unfit mother. I fought back as hard as I could, but it felt like I was swimming against the tide. Every time I thought I was making progress, something else would come up to push me back. The worst blow came when Tom, my former lover, was called to testify. I had hoped that he would stand by me, that he would help me fight for our daughter. Instead, he denied everything. "I never had an affair with Olivia," he said under oath. "We're just co-workers, nothing more." I had no idea she was claiming I was the father of her child. As I listened to him lie, I felt something inside me break. How could he do this? How could he deny his own child? But then I realized he was doing exactly what I had done. He was protecting himself, his reputation, his life, just like I had tried to do by lying to Greg all those years. The irony wasn't lost on me. In the end, the court ruled in Greg's favor. He was granted full custody of Lily, with me allowed only supervised dissertation twice a month. The judge cited my pattern of deception as the primary reason for the decision. As for the divorce settlement, I got nothing. No alimony, no share in our assets. The prenup I had signed before we got married, back when I thought we'd be together forever, came back to haunt me. I was left with nothing but the clothes on my back and a mountain of legal debt. Megan, my so-called best friend, never returned my calls. I later heard through mutual acquaintances that she had distanced herself from me to protect her own reputation. Apparently, being friends with the town pariah wasn't good for business. Tom, of course, was long gone. He had transferred to another branch of the company shortly after our affair ended, and I had no way of contacting him. Not that he would have helped anyway given his courtroom performance. My family, while not completely cutting me off, kept their distance. They were polite but cold, clearly disapproving of my actions. My sister, who had always been my closest confidant, now looked at me like I was a stranger. I found myself alone, living in a small dingy apartment on the outskirts of town. I had lost my job in the midst of all the drama. Apparently, a marketing executive embroiled in a scandalous divorce wasn't the image the company wanted to project. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I tried to rebuild my life, but it felt like I was constantly swimming against the current. Every job interview seemed to end with an awkward question about my personal situation. Every attempt to make new friends was met with suspicious glances and whispered gossip. The worst part was the visits with Lily. Twice a month, I got to spend 2 hours with her under the watchful eye of a court-appointed supervisor. It was torture, seeing my daughter grow and change, knowing I was missing so much of her life. Lily, for her part, was confused and hurt. She didn't understand why she couldn't live with me, why her parents couldn't be in the same room together anymore. Each visit ended with tears and pleas for me to come home, and each time it broke my heart all over again. One particularly difficult visit, about 6 months after the divorce, Lily asked the question I had been dreading. "Mommy," she said, her little face scrunched up in concentration. "Is it true what Daddy said? That he's not really my daddy?" I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. How do you explain something like this to a 5-year-old? How do you tell your child that their entire world is built on a lie? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "Lily, sweetheart," I began, my voice trembling. "Family is complicated. Your daddy loves you very, very much. He's been there for you since the day you were born. That makes him your real daddy no matter what." Lily's brow furrowed. "But is he my real daddy? Like, did he help make me?" I felt tears welling up in my eyes. How had I let things get to this point? How had I put my innocent child in this impossible situation? "The truth is," I said, choosing my words carefully, "there was another man who helped make you. But Greg, your daddy, he chose to be your father. He loved you from the moment he knew about you, and he's never stopped loving you. That's what makes him your real daddy." Lily was quiet for a long moment. Processing this information, then she looked up at me, her eyes wide and sad. "Is that why Daddy is so mad at you? Because you love someone else?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Do you still love the other man?" she asked. "No, baby," I said, pulling her clothes. "That was a mistake. A big mistake that hurt a lot of people. The only good thing that came out of it was you." As I held my daughter, I silently vowed to do whatever it took to make things right. I knew it would be a long, difficult road, but I had to try. For Lily's sake and for my own. The next few months were a blur of legal battles and emotional upheavals. I fought tooth and nail for more time with Lily, but Greg's lawyers were relentless. They painted me as an unfit mother, using my past infidelity as proof that I couldn't be trusted with a child. Meanwhile, I was struggling to keep my head above water financially. The temp jobs I managed to land barely covered my rent and groceries, let alone the mounting legal fees. I sold everything I could. My car, my jewelry, even my wedding ring. But it was never enough. One particularly low night, after another frustrating day in court, I found myself sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment, surrounded by unpaid bills and legal documents. I picked up my phone, my finger hovering over Tom's number. Maybe if I could just talk to him, convince him to tell the truth. But I knew it was a pipe dream. Tom had made his choice. He had his own life, his own family to protect. Why would he risk it all for a woman he had a brief affair with years ago? As I sat there wallowing in self-pity, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but the message made my blood run cold. "I know what you did. I have proof. Meet me at the park tomorrow at noon if you want to keep your secret." My mind raced. What proof? Who could this be? For a wild moment I thought it might be Tom. But that didn't make sense. He had nothing to gain by blackmailing me now. Despite every instinct telling me not to go, I found myself at the park the next day, nervously scanning the faces of everyone who passed by. Just as I was about to give up and leave, a familiar voice called out behind me. "Hello, Olivia." I spun around, my heart pounding. There, standing before me with a smug smile on her face, was Megan. What are you doing here?" I stammered. Megan's smile widened. "I'm here to make a deal," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "You see, I've been doing some digging and I've found some very interesting information about your little industration." I felt my knees go weak. "What are you talking about?" She pulled out her phone, tapping the screen a few times before turning it to face me. On it was a series of emails between Tom and me from 5 years ago. Emails that left no doubt about the nature of our relationship. "How'd you get those?" I whispered, feeling the blood drain from my face. Megan shrugged. "Let's just say I have my ways. The question is, what are you willing to do to keep these from becoming public?" I stared at her, unable to comprehend what was happening. This woman had been my best friend for over a decade, which shared everything. Our hopes, our fears, our secrets. And now here she was, trying to blackmail me. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Megan's face hardened. "Why?" "Because you've ruined everything, Olivia. You had it all, the perfect husband, the perfect life. And you threw it away. Do you have any idea how that made the rest of us feel?" "How did it make me feel?" I shook my head and wildered. I didn't understand. "How did my mistakes affect you?" She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Of course you don't understand. You've always been so wrapped up in your own little world. Did you ever stop to think about how your actions reflect on the people around you? On your friends?" As Megan continued to rant, the pieces started to fall into place. The way she had distanced herself after the truth came out. The whispers I'd heard about her struggling business. The pity looks from our mutual friends. "You're blaming me for your problems," I said, realization dawning. "You think of my scandal somehow." "What? Tarnished you by association?" Megan's eyes flashed with anger. "It's not just me. It's all of us. Your family, your friends. We all had to deal with the fallout from your little affair. And now, I think it's time you paid for it." I felt a surge of anger, hot and fierce. "So what do you want, Megan?" "Money. Because in case you haven't noticed, I didn't have any." She smirked. "Oh, I know all about your financial troubles. No, what I want is for you to disappear. Leave town. Start over somewhere else. Let the rest of us move on with our lives without your shadow hanging over us." I stared at her, incredulous. "You want me to leave? To abandon my daughter?" Megan's face softened for a moment. The flicker of the friend I once knew shining through. "It's for the best. Live. For everyone. Even for Lally. She deserves a chance at a normal life, don't you think?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Was Megan right? Would Lily be better off without me in her life? The thought was almost too painful to bear. But as I stood there, looking at the woman who had once been my closest friend, something inside me snapped. I was tired of being the victim. Tired of letting other people control my life. "No," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. Megan blinked, taken aback. "What?" I said. "No," I repeated. "I'm not going anywhere. I make mistakes, yes. Huge, life-altering mistakes. But I'm done running from them. I'm done letting other people decide what's best for me or for my daughter." I stepped closer to Megan, my voice low and intense. "So go ahead. Release those emails. Tell the whole world. I don't care anymore. Because the truth is, nothing you can do to me is worse than what I've already been through. And I'll be damned if I let you or anyone else take me away from my child." Megan stayed at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. This clearly wasn't the reaction she had expected. "You're bluffing," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I shook my head. "I'm not. I'm just done. Done with the lies, done with the secrets, done with letting fear control my life. So do your worst, Megan. I'll be right here, fighting for my daughter and for a chance to make things right." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Megan standing there, clutching her phone. As I made my way home, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. True to her word, or perhaps realizing her plan had backfired, Megan released the emails. They spread through our small town like wildfire, reigniting all the old gossip and speculation. But something unexpected happened. As the initial shock wore off, people began to see the situation in a new light. The emails showed a side of the story that hadn't been told before. My guilt, my struggle with the decision to keep the truth from Greg, my genuine love for my daughter. To my surprise, some people even reached out to offer support. Old friends who had distanced themselves came forward to apologize. Coworkers I hadn't spoken to in months called to check on me. Even my family began to thaw. My sister showed up at my apartment one day, tears in her eyes, and pulled me into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have been there for you." It wasn't all positive, of course. There were still plenty of people who judged me, who whispered behind my back. But for the first time since the truth had come out, I felt like I could hold my head up high. The real turning point came during one of my dissertations with Lolly. As we sat coloring together, she suddenly put down her crayon and looked up at me. "Mommy," she said, a little face serious. "I'm glad you're my mommy." I felt tears spring to my eyes. "Oh, sweetheart. I'm glad I'm your mommy too." So glad." She nodded, picking up her crayon again. "Daddy says you made a mistake, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person. He says everyone makes mistakes sometimes." I stared at her, stunned. "Has Greg really said that?" As if on cue, the door opened and Greg walked in. He usually kept his distance during these visits, but today he crossed the room and sat down next to us. "Hey, Pumpkin," he said to Lolly, "having fun with Mom?" Lolly nodded enthusiastically, showing him her drawing. As she chatted away about her artwork, Greg turned to me. "We need to talk," he said quietly. My heart raced. "Okay," I managed to reply. After the visit, as Lolly was being led away by the supervisor, Greg and I stepped outside. For a long moment we stood in silence, neither of us knowing quite where to begin. Finally Greg spoke. "I saw the emails," he said. I nodded, bracing myself for his anger. But when I looked up at him, I was surprised to see not anger, but a deep sadness in his eyes. "I'm not saying I forgive you," he continued. "What you did, it still hurts. It probably always will, but I think I understand a little better now." I felt a glimmer of hope, fragile but persistent. "Greg, He held up a hand, cutting me off. "Let me finish. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. But I'd asked about Lolly, about what's best for everyone. And I've realized something." He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "Lolly needs her mother. She needs both of us. And as much as it pains me to admit it, I think we need to find a way to co-parent. For her sake." I felt like I could hardly breathe. Was this really happening? "Are you saying?" Greg nodded. "I'm saying we should revisit the custody arrangement. Maybe work towards joint custody. It won't be easy and there's a lot we need to work through. But I'm willing to try if you are." Tears streamed down my face as I nodded vigorously. "Yes," I choked out. "Yes, I won't.